for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Back on this rap ish, I ain't even broke a sweat, homie, this practice. Pondering my next move, staring at my track list, hope I ain't missing my window. Praying like a Baptist, Seattle's own, tired of this Game of Thrones. They made a list of the best rappers and guess who wasn't on? While the disrespect continues, I'm steady packing these venues. Guess if you ain't at the table, you on the menu, and I'm that spitter, baby. They don't want you to see, but everybody's out to Capitol Hill's rocking with me. Boys smoke the trays and plan to getting their life together. I'm comfortable with my role, so I'm like, whatever. Me? I ain't got a job, but I work hard. And you don't work hard, but you got a job. The irony is I'm judged while you feel the applause. I'm slept on, that's why I had to set this alarm. My dudes is armed, I'm armed with this arm charm. Body banging like she got that cream from Barry Bonds. Yeah.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
That trade season is here, a real hitter with a mic, I'm everything that they fear. With that hood ain't the same, I was all on their ass, I'm level-headed. So yo, my dudes love when I spaz, and I'm so over Seattle's passive-aggressive attitude. They don't call you back, what they really saying is F you. While I'm from the same place, I move at a different pace. I prefer if you just said it to my face, damn, I did it.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Average dudes with they average spit, writing average rhymes, knocking average chicks. The closer I get, I can feel the people starting to shift. I'm loyal to a fault, and everybody can't come with. Rap's a rich man's game, I'm only playing with change. They bang models and singers, I'm knocking my own flame, I'm different. The crowd, I move with the chosen few. Black thoughts, I could be the front man for the roots. No diamonds and gold, I'm on my sticks and stones. If we can see your panty line, you should have on a thong. My team is strong, through this fire we forged a bond. And they already know what it is when I get on. To the hearse, party like it's December 31st. When I'm on my deathbed, I probably cracking my nurse. You ain't got the bars to compete. I'm a verbal athlete, deflating these boys so they say that I cheat. Damn, I did it.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
I should probably start by apologizing for the long wait, man. You know, I know I be tripping, but I'm not just a rapper, I'm an artist. And, you know, my creative process is a little bit different than most. Nonetheless, I want to welcome everybody out to the Dre's Experience. I got TCF in the building, my whole camp's here with me. I got the band in here laying this cool-ass vibe. And I'm Seattle's own. Let's get into it.
Hello. Good morning and grand rising, beautiful folks out there. Welcome to the Morning Update Show. Happy Tuesday to you. I'm your co-host, Trey Holiday, and we've got another amazing show for you guys today. I'm so excited to dive in and always to be diving in with my co-host with the most, Big O. What up, Big O?
Trey Holiday, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Man, I'm all right. You know, it's just been busy. Man, let's going into 2 weeks now. It's been pretty busy, of course, with all this news going on. People who were tuned into us earlier just saw this City Council Public Safety Committee meeting that, and we'll talk about there here in a second, where they talked about this ruse and some everything else. But you're right. We have a great show today. We're going to be joined by Sydney Brownstone, a journalist with the Seattle Times, who, man, wrote a story about how people who are experiencing homelessness and people who are experiencing, being unhoused, the issues that they face when they have a chronic illness here in the city of Seattle. And I mean, it's so well written, in photos by Erica Schultz, as you know. I mean, what an incredible dynamic duo right there. So we're going to be fortunate enough to talk to Sydney about that and go over a few other things today as well.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive in because I was so moved by the article. I love when we can bring those kinds of experiences and create additions to themes we're already talking about here on the Morning Update Show. So homelessness has been a big deal for us here. Excited to dive in with her.
You know, humanity has been a big deal for us as well. and just the humanity that came through in this article. So excited about that. Let's get right into it. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Morning Update Show. Want to remind you that right now is the perfect opportunity for you to tag and share the stream. Go ahead and tag and share the stream with people you feel would appreciate culturally relevant news and information emanating from right here in the rainy Emerald City. Want to give a big shout out to our partners over at the South Seattle Emerald and also KBCS 91.3 over at Bellevue College. Also want to remind everybody that you can listen to the Morning Update Show anywhere that you listen to your favorite podcast. Right there is got SoundCloud coming in, but also you can check us out on Google, Spotify, iTunes, anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcast. All you have to do is search Converge Media Network. This is also a time of the show. Remind everybody from our friends over at Public Health, Seattle, King County, that if you need to get vaccinated, if you need a booster shot, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, if you need testing, or if you're vaccine hesitant, man, Salman definitely is putting this link in there right now. It's Public Health, Seattle, King County. And, you know, the news around this COVID is, woo, I mean, man, this thing is spreading like fast.
No, like it's super fast. And even this morning, taking my son to school, we drove past a rapid testing site. And when I tell you the line was wrapped down the block, my son was like, man, Mom, like all these people standing in line. I said, I know they're trying to get those COVID tests, man. A lot of folks right now are experiencing sickness, wanting to identify if it's COVID. So I know that those that are doing the data entry and collecting all the information about, hey, where did you get COVID? There's probably a busy call center happening right now around us.
Yeah,
man.
that was a contact trace.
Yeah.
It's what to say, but across the whole country. And, you know, you see people, these hospitals are filling up and some everything else. The best thing is over at Public Health. And, you know, we've just, there's been no like concerted relationship here. I mean, we did some PSAs and stuff with Public Health months and months ago. But, you know, every day when we're like, hey, you know what, here's the link, that's just us doing it, right? Mm-hmm. But Public Health reached out and, you know, they want to ramp up some of their communications around the vaccine and what's out there. So we'll see what comes of that as well.
Yeah. Always ready to provide the information, man.
Doing our part.
Yeah.
All right. One more thing here. Maybe we should put this out there. For Culture. We've been talking about this. Get to the bag, man. So For Culture, they have their recovery going on for cultural producers. And the best thing is we got like a PSA that I will play later on here because T-Dub breaks it down so well. But it's, are you a cultural producer impacted by the pandemic? Got until February 2nd. Salman's got the link over there in the comments. It's a lot of cultural producers in a city like Seattle impacted by COVID. Grants going from 1,000 to 12,000.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things I really appreciate about this effort is I'm always talking about the intentionality. They really know the audience that they're looking to serve at For Culture. So they've made the application process as simple as it can be. They've opened up their doors to help out with the application process. And they've also lowered the barriers for grant applicants. So you don't have to have a business entity per se in order for you to apply for this. If you're a freelancer out there, been doing it as kind of contract work, you know, just on your own, all of you are able to apply for this grant funding. So that to me is another indicator of their intentionality behind these funds.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right. So we talked about it. We mentioned it yesterday. And of course, we aired it earlier today. Is that Councilmember Herbold, who's the chair of the Public Safety and Human Services Committee over there at City Council, had a meeting this morning. And we'll go and put the slide up, OPA. Right. And you keep it right there for a second. And so you had Director Meyerberg from the Office of Police Accountability, Deputy Mayor Monisha Harrell, and then also Brandy Grant, who is the Executive Director of the Community Police Commission, commonly known in the streets as the CPC, right? You can bring it down now. And so, man, you could just tell that this thing, it went over time. I mean, 30 minutes, I'm sure that's just their usual structure, whatever, when these committee meetings, maybe that's a usual time limit there. It went well over. They really started talking probably around 9:50 and then almost went to 10:50, actually right here, but almost before the show started. Meyerberg, it broke some things down. It was interesting too. He said that and we'll pull the tape. So I don't want to quote him, but he said something like, man, what happened don't even fit the definition quite of a ruse, but that's the closest thing that under policy of what he could check it in as. Lots of calls on public comment. As you can imagine, there's a lot of people feeling some kind of way about this. And some real interesting question. Deputy Mayor Harrell was real short, but Deputy Mayor Harrell said, you can't, basically one thing everybody said was like, this wouldn't even been caught if it wasn't for like the media investigating, right? But Deputy Mayor Harrell was like, yo, this is totally unacceptable. And they talked about, chain of command. Harrell was a bit short and reserved. I think because, this ain't what they say. This ain't a new rodeo for Harrell in some of the past positions that she's had. Brandy Grant, CPC, it was like, yo, I got one question, but it was like in 5 minutes, it was like 30 questions. You know what I'm saying? But they were all like relevant questions. There was no way Meyerberg could really address all the questions that Executive Director Grant had. And then, of course, the council members, lots of questions as well. This is very open-ended. I'll be honest with you. If this was intended today to be able to bring some kind of understanding or closure, it just really opened a lot more questions, which is a good thing because these questions need to be answered.
Yeah, and rightfully so, right? I mean, this is what we're talking about when we, encourage people to, participate in the civic engagement process. And when you're able to bring your voice to the table and share your concerns about something that really does play out, and inevitably it affects so many lives, to be able to root out these types of tactics in the Seattle Police Department, I think is now a new wave of, interest, because we have this example. And, as, Justin Carter kind of was saying too, is, hey, it's interesting because there's probably a lot of times we've never known that this was taking place. So it really is on the backs of Black media, I gotta say, where we were able to root this out. But to understand that, of course people are going to get engaged because it's an outrageous act.
What was also being heard, I was on Cairo FM this morning, and thank you to Hannah Scott over at Cairo FM. And some of the things I touched on, and even Meyerberg was basically saying, if the report's incomplete, if you think it's incomplete, that's because people didn't cooperate with me. You know what I'm saying? So it's, what he's saying is he has the best report possible based upon the level of cooperation that he got from SPD officers, is kind of what I'm getting out of Meyerberg. But one of the other things, a few people called in and talked about a group that people never really talk about in the Seattle protests, and that's the residents up there on Capitol Hill. And it's so easy for people out there to just make these polarizing statements. It's the police and the protesters. I tell people this, I've been saying it for a long time. When the tear gas came out, on the issue of the tear gas, it wasn't protesters that got tear gassed. A whole neighborhood that had protesters in it got tear gassed. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And when this whole thing is here, it's about this ruse. It's funny because people are so putting this whole issue in a vacuum. And me, I'm not trying to make a mountain. People are like, well, you make a mountain out of a molehill. My friend, I've known for 13 months what happened. If I wanted to make a mountain out of a molehill, I had 13 months to make this a spectacle right now, or leak out information. I got emails. I got all kinds of stuff. That's not my nature, and that's not my temperament. But, we need to just be very fair and honest about these kind of things. But people forget about the residents. And so it's funny, right? Because they're like, oh, well, if the protesters were listening to misinformation, that's the protesters and the police. They shouldn't have been on the police. Man, look how fast. Listen, I'll keep it innocuous here. Even on the Twitter account, when the mountain is out, look how fast it spreads. You know what I'm saying? They're like, yo, the mountain's out, right? Information in these social channels, it spreads. So irregardless if that was an intended or unintended consequence, the residents and the people who live and work up in Capitol Hill are impacted either way. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't direct communication between this is protesters and this is police. Anyway.
No, and I'll say this too, because I think you're really making a valid point here. I'll say that one of the things that people have to understand is that residents in the area were also on high alert as things were unfolding. So they too were listening to certain things. They were following certain accounts. We saw this time and time again because so many people were out there live streaming. There was a lot of views and a lot of eyes on this thing from not just people that were protesting, but also people that were actually spectators of what was going on. Like, man, do I need to make sure do I need to pack my kids' bags and go to my parents' house? Do I need to get out of the area? You had people on high alert, man.
Tens of thousands and at times hundreds of thousands of people were watching our live stream. We weren't monitoring the police radio. We couldn't, that wasn't our bag. Our bag was live streaming. Somebody else was doing that. But on our live stream, so anybody who's watching our live stream, we're sitting there and people were like, hey, the Proud Boys are on the way and everything else. So if you're a resident, you didn't have to be like tapping in the police radio. All you had to do was be watching the live stream or following the social channels. And people continuously leave the residents and the people who live and work up in Capitol Hill out of the discussion. They leave the neighborhood out of the discussion, which is crazy. And then, I continue to talk about what we talked about yesterday, is that it's okay just to say when something is wrong. It's okay to say, all this moral equivalency, and I'm telling you, people, they're using too many butts instead of ands. Man, it was just wrong. You know what I'm saying? And now whether people intended the consequences or not or whatever, you know what I'm saying? It sounded like some of these officers was like, what? Want me to do what? Okay, you're the boss. I don't know. But the whole point is like, yeah, it's wrong. And you get people want to make these equivalencies. What about the murders on those was wrong too. Have you lost your mind? The murder of Lorenzo Anderson Jr. was wrong. The murder of Antonio Mays Jr. Go ahead and put this one up. Because we've continued our outreach. And it'd be funny because, it come to Converge and people are like, oh, well, you're forgetting about the victims and this and that. This is one platform right here where we ain't never forgot about no victims. And if you ask the Seattle Police Department, they'll tell you, ask Seattle Police Department, what media outlet has made the most inquiries about the murder of Antonio Mays Jr. And I promise you, they'll tell you Converge. I'll sit right here and I can look into this camera and say, I got no problem saying, man, what I feel is right or wrong. It's not based upon a political ideology. It's not based upon Twitter followers or anything else. There's enough wrong things that happened last summer that, man, we can take ownership around everything. But let's do that. Let's take it item by item if need be. Let's do that. And people need to stop all this conflating and all of this moral. It's just wild, man.
Well, it's interesting because here we are now, and day 11 of 2022, and this being in 2020, and information just now coming out. This is one of those things where there's so many people that have been affected. Now it is over a year and a half of all of this kind of like, we understand it was a CHOP era, protests were happening around the nation. People were upset, but there was something specific that happened here in Seattle with regard to the Seattle Police Department. And that is what we're talking about today. And when you talk about the wrong is wrong, right is right, this is something that we could experience in almost any city. But here, there was a very unique way that it played out, man. And you're right. Oh, if we do not actually uproot these issues, unfortunately, they'll just persist.
And I'm going to say this because, I'm the eternal optimist. I'm going to say this. I think that maybe people who are hitting me up and they're like, yeah, well, what's up with Antonio Mays Jr.? What's up with Lorenzo Anderson Jr.? I'm hopeful that those people, their concern for the murder of young black men don't stop there at the CHOP. You know what I'm saying? Donita Sinclair, she got a whole breakdown. It's still an epidemic happening. So this is what I'm saying. Let your care and concern continue. Don't let it stop in June 2020. And that's when you stopped caring about the murder and the death of black people here in this city. You know what I'm saying? Let's continue to say their name. Lorenzo Anderson Jr., Antonio Mays Jr., and let's continue to say all these other names that are out there. Because otherwise, if you care about black lives, if you care about the murder of black children, begins and ends in the chop, my friend, what are you really saying?
Yeah, no, it's so true. This is something we talk about all the time. This is why when we just had Sean Good on, we're talking about all of these things that are happening across the region with a regional approach around stopping and halting and bringing a decline to this increase of gun violence that we're seeing. Trust and believe that the CHOP was, had spotlights on it. Okay. But ultimately, these are issues that we deal with in communities all the time. And we talk about it right here really on a personal level, how all of these acts of violence, unfortunately, they end up affecting us. Even if I find out weeks later, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so-and-so's child, that was so-and-so's brother. Knowing that and having a 6th degree of separation from a lot of the people that are experiencing this, trust and believe, man, this is not something that ended in the CHOP.
Yeah, so I would say this, is that I think that as a city, we got to be open and willing to hear the bad things that we might not want to hear about ourselves. And, we got to hear bad things about our police department. We got to hear bad things about our citizens because, Mama always says forgiveness is giving up all hope for a better past. And good God, I wish it was a time machine, and people just don't know. People just don't know how impacted we still are. These murders up there that we saw. I mean, just the nerve of people to tell me, I don't care. What about Lorenzo? What about Antonio? The best thing is, we got a track record. I ain't got to prove nothing to nobody on the internet. You know what I'm saying? You talk to these people, talk to their family, talk to our neighborhood. But the nerve, man. I'll just say this. This is a conversation that we're going to continue here, but I would just hope that our city, we got enough courage to just, man, when things are wrong, we can say they're wrong and not be so aligned with political ideology and whatever else that you stray so far away from just being able to make just a basic assessment of like, man, this ain't okay.
I agree, and honestly, I think you're right. When we talk about it being a continued discussion, it's not something that gets buttoned up quickly. And for those of you who are saying, oh, a mountain out of a molehill, all these kind of things, you just don't understand that it takes the continued discourse in a public format to really keep these issues alive. And it takes people diving in and digging into all of these issues to ensure that we uncover truth. And I think that right now we really have an opportunity to use this as an example of things that need to be happening moving forward. If we're really, really hoping for, opportunity for the public and the community to begin to really trust the police, we got to root these kind of things out. Then it does mean continued discussion.
There it is. All right. Well, that's the end of that discussion for today. We got a very important guest back in the green room. Got a handcrafted motion graphic here. There you go. Sydney Brownstone, journalist with the Seattle Times. And man, we're going to be talking about the plight of homeless and unhoused people here in our city, which is already a difficult enough position, but also struggling with chronic illness. You're watching the Morning Update Show.
Hey guys, Besa Gordon here, and before heading to Belize, Trey Holiday and I had to make sure we linked up with our good friends over at Market Street Shoes to, of course, grab a few things for the trip. From bags to socks, shoes, sunglasses, earrings, and more. Before going on any trip, make sure you stop at Market Street Shoes. Trust me, you'll find just what you need to make your trip not only enjoyable, but fashionable.
Hey y'all, T-Dub here, letting you know about another art funding opportunity. Fur culture recovery funding for individuals is available now, and here's what you need to know to apply. Are you a cultural producer who has been impacted by the pandemic? If you answered yes, but what is a cultural producer? Well, you are a cultural producer if your work, paid or unpaid, is dedicated to creating cultural experiences in any discipline or at any stage of your career. Some examples include exhibit designers, museums educations, archivists, restoration professionals, curators, history researchers, artists, of course, and more. And understanding that grant language can sometimes feel exclusive to specific people, using terms like cultural producer is one of the ways For Culture seeks to broaden its scope of applicants. In other words, this funding is for you. And look, the application fatigue is real. I get it, they get it. But the For Culture staff is here to walk you through it. They have grants from $1,000 to $12,000, so please don't miss out. The deadline to apply is Wednesday, February 2nd. Head to forculture.org/recovery to get information on virtual group workshops, application support, language translation, and more.
You see that Seattle News, Views, and Brews right there. Brian Callanan is actually going to be here tomorrow. Brian Callanan from the Seattle channel and also the host of Seattle News, Views, and Brews. And you know, Kevin retired. I don't blame him. He hung it up, but been replaced by David Crowman.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so Brian said, you know, he's good. You always like when Brian comes.
Yeah.
He got that voice.
No, it's gonna be so nice to have Brian back in the studio. And honestly, I haven't been able to be with Brian in the new studio, so it'd be really great to have him here.
No, good stuff. All right. Salman, please bring in Sydney Brownstone.
Hi.
How are you?
Hi,
Welcome to the Morning
Sydney.
Update Show.
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. This is such an honor to be here with you both.
Oh man,
Yeah.
it's good to have you here.
It really is.
We'll put up the cover right now. It was I think it's this cover photo over there, Salman. You wrote an article that was published on Sunday. There it is right there. You wrote this article. It was published on Sunday, and it caught a lot of people's attention, including my own. And you told the story of Rahima Jackson, who's no longer with us now, and really kind of the struggle of being homeless and unhoused and also struggling with chronic illness. And I'll give you some space right here to kind of tell everybody what the article is about.
Yeah, so my colleague Erica Schultz and I started following Rahima at the beginning or at the end of last year, so at the end of 2020. And what we were interested in was her experience of navigating the healthcare and homelessness systems while dealing with stage 4 breast cancer. So Rahima actually had been a home health aide for a long time. So she had worked in the healthcare industry, but she didn't go to the doctor for a really long time, despite shooting pain she had up and down the sides of her body because she didn't have insurance. Like, you know, so many Americans, and particularly so many Black Americans. And she, you know, when she finally went to the doctor, she couldn't take the pain anymore. It was discovered that she had a metastasizing cancer, you know, through her breast and then through the bones of her body, through her spine. And the thing is, you know, Rahima is not alone in this experience. There are thousands of people in Seattle who have serious chronic health conditions like Rahima who have nowhere to live. And what that means is that, you know, whatever treatment plan they might have might not mean much because they don't have an appropriate place to receive treatment. And I think the thing that jumped out to me the most about this story is, you know, I think if you're not confronted with stories like this, we just assume, oh, well, there's a place for people to go, right? Like when they're sick and they're homeless, and there isn't. Like our society just has never come up with a place or a way to take care of people like Rahima. Rahima was lucky enough to receive the care of the palliative care team at Harborview, which is this tiny team of part-time team of 3 people who are mobile, and they go above and beyond to connect homeless patients with care, but also kind of establish end of life goals and figure out what those patients really want. It goes so far beyond just the, okay, how are we going to treat your cancer? It's what do you want your life to look like? And what do you want your legacy to be? And for Rahima, when she was diagnosed, Rahima was an immigrant from Zanzibar, and she loved music. And for her, she wanted to make an album about what she was going through. So she started recording songs in her hospital bed. Her goal was to share with the world her experience. Don't ignore changes you see in your body. Don't let that anxiety of, if you've had other people in your family die of cancer, don't let that anxiety stop you from going to the doctor because you fear the worst. And she actually, she recorded these songs. She worked with a producer in Tanzania. She recorded a music video with local artists. Abdul Kasimali and Yuri Desi did the video, and a whole team of other folks they work with. And so, that was kind of her project. But Erica and I, we followed Rahima as she bounced from the hospital to a shelter to try and get housing. And that's the other thing, a lot of people assume, okay, well, once you get into a shelter, if you stick there long enough, you're going to get housing, right? But as we found out through following Rahima, there were all sorts of barriers up, I could get into specifics, but it's just, her story was illuminating and heartbreaking, and she was just a force of nature. I wouldn't be surprised if some of your viewers knew Rahima personally. It seemed like she made family wherever she met, whoever she met. But yeah, it was really eye-opening for me to follow her and watch her have to go through all these hurdles. And if you have a chronic illness, or if you know someone with a chronic illness, you know how horrible the American healthcare system is, and trying to make appointments and schedule and all that. Imagine doing that without a home, without a place to receive treatment. It just gets so much more stressful, to the point where, we know that homeless folks get these chronic illnesses younger. They're seen at more advanced stages because, they're disconnected from regular healthcare, and they die 20 to 30 years earlier than people who are housed. So I think that's, one of the other takeaways is homelessness in many ways is a death sentence. And it's a choice. It's a choice. It's a political choice. It's a result of structures and policies that we have enacted over time and that we continue to uphold.
Wow. Yeah. One of the things that I noticed, or one of the things that was transformational for me in reading this article, is that we're not experts on homelessness and unhousing. We follow along the best that we can here, and we try to uplift, especially resources that are out there. But I remember the conversation about the Red Lion and the Red Lion in Renton, right? And I'll be honest with you, and just being sincere, until I read that article and saw a face, there was the Red Lion. It was just a shelter. These are people who are homeless and unhoused, and this is the city of Renton, and here's the issue. Can we go ahead and put this, or it says Red Lion? There it is. So there's the Red Lion right there. We'll keep that up there for a second. But the thing is, for me, was that once you placed her there in the article, it changed my whole way that I even looked at that shelter, and that's kind of the impact of the article. But we have the Red Lion up here, and this is a photo by Erica Schultz, and maybe you could tell us what was happening right here.
Yeah, so this is an amazing photo. This is a photo of Rahima Center with her care team, the palliative care team. So her social worker, Michael Light, and nurse Joe Hufford, and they're elbowing, obviously because it's the pandemic. But this was a really it was a nuanced place for Rahima, right? Before she came to the Red Lion, she had actually been in a shelter that didn't allow her to have pot that she smoked to ease her cancer symptoms and the pain medications, like narcotic pain medications. It was an abstinence-based recovery shelter for women, and she was reprimanded for having those medications on her. And she actually tried to take her own life. So, she intentionally overdosed on sleeping pills, and she and her social worker decided, okay, We have to get you into a different setting because, being in this other shelter is too stressful. So after that, Rahima came to the Red Lion. And if you remember from all the coverage of the Red Lion at the time, it was really kind of an experiment, right? Like, okay, we're in a pandemic. We have these congregate shelters, which, let's be clear, congregate shelters before the pandemic were not good places to have a chronic illness. They were already inappropriate for people. Like, if you are immunosuppressed, think about how easy it is to catch something in a congregate shelter. And when I say congregate shelter, I mean like those big overnight shelters with mats on the floor 6 inches apart. So, the Red Lion was part of a huge change in the homeless services industry during the pandemic, where they were like, okay, we need to isolate people. What if we go into these hotels that no one is using because we're in a pandemic, and we allow them to stay there? And if you look at the photo of Rahima, what you'll see is, I don't know if you can actually see it, but behind her, there are some cat toys, which is really interesting because Rahima didn't have a cat, but someone had given them to her as a gift, and she hung them up behind her as decoration. And in that little desk area beside her is where she recorded a lot of her music. Like, people gave her things, and she was actually able to create a space of her own out of it. And that's something that people don't have in shelters. They're completely devoid of personal touches. So this was a much closer version to feeling safe, to having a home, than she had probably for years. At the same time, as much as, activists and other people have been lauding these hotel shelters as, really important places to have a door that locks, to have a sense of privacy, to have a sense of place, Rahima, it still wasn't appropriate for Rahima. She told this story. It really deeply affected her. Of when she first came to the Red Lion, she kept her pain medication in her room. And at 9 a.m., she has to take her pain medication. Otherwise, she starts to feel, the cancer pain, and it's really debilitating. And so she accidentally locked her cancer medication, her pain medication, in her room. And so she went down to the front desk and said, hey, I left my cancer medication, my pain medication in my room. Can you help me get to it? And she said that for a long time, no one did. Like, they just weren't really responsive to her. And, she was increasingly in pain. She was getting increasingly frustrated. And she told the story of having a confrontation with this shelter worker, the supervisor, who told her, this is not a hospital. This is not a hotel. This is a shelter. And to Rahima, that meant, you are not important. You are not a guest here. We are not here to serve you. And that, I think, that kind of psychological impact of homelessness gets really underplayed, but it's something that affected her deeply. And also, it's not a hospital. It's not a hotel. It's a shelter. So, for people like Rahima, who need to have access to this pain medication, and for shelter workers who aren't trained in, administering medication or taking care of people who are dying, it's a really inappropriate setting. I mean, I will say that the Red Lion did have a Harborview doc on staff. He made this little room into his own little clinic, but it's really not a long-term solution. And when Rahima's friend Latasha flew out from Chicago to see her, the Red Lion reminded her of a prison because it had a security gate around the outside. So, I think part of this discussion about hotels and homelessness and, these changes we're making is, they're not permanent solutions. They're not permanent housing. You can make the nicest shelter possible, and it will still fall short of actual solutions to homelessness.
I mean, you're just mentioning so many different things in the article that to me were so striking, honestly, Sydney. And there, one of the themes that I really walked away with after reading this article was there's so much nuance, right, in how people that are dealing with chronic illness and they're unhoused have to try to navigate the systems. And, you talked earlier about certain barriers, and here was one at the Red Lion where Rahima, they're not treating them as hotel guests, even though they had staff there, right, that are used to they're in the hospitality industry. So the idea is that they couldn't foresee, that, we need to kind of just have our human side, our humanity really front facing with these folks, regardless if they're, those from the unhoused or if there were a guest in the hotel. The idea is that they should have been able to be treated as such comes out in your article. But then two, you talk about housing. And, you know, for me, I've done some extensive work in housing, particularly in Seattle. And as soon as Rahima gets that voucher to get an apartment, it's like the golden ticket, right? It really is. And then, you know, going to the first place and being like, man, I'm finally going to get into this building, and there being barriers there. Again, these nuances with how folks have to navigate systems was key to me. Is that also something you really learned as you were following Rahima and her story?
Yeah, totally. And I'm so glad that you bring up the housing piece. One thing I did want to say earlier is that, you know, it was shelter staffers. So like people who work for downtown emergency services centers staffing these hotels. But you bring up a good point, you know, about like compassion. You know, there are structural reasons as to why, you know, Rahima may have been treated that way. And it's that shelter workers, the people who are doing the most in our society sometimes, are really low paid and they experience burnout and they don't get the support they need. So, you know, when you have that kind of system set up, that pay structure set up, you cycle through people quickly, they get burned out quickly, there's compassion fatigue, etc. But anyway, I'm on a tangent. Anyway, housing. Yeah. So in the story, and what happened is Rahima gets this rare federal voucher. These, you know, you're right, it's like the golden ticket. It will pay for $1,500 something for an apartment. And that's more than I pay for my rent. Like, that is huge. So she goes to this building called the Jackson, and it's one of the, and you know, her last name is Jackson. So it feels like fate to her, like, oh, this is the place that's meant for me. And it's this huge development on South Jackson Street. 523 new units across 2 buildings. And it's got a tax break from the city for having affordable units. Now, what that means here is that these units cost $1,481 or $1,581. That's what's considered affordable. So if you were a home health aide or you're making minimum wage, not actually affordable. Anyway, Rahima goes inside. The first barrier that I didn't actually write about is she can't actually see the apartment herself. So that she can't go on a tour of the apartment. Why? Because she doesn't have an ID. And it's like kind of from what I understand, like a practice in the real estate industry, that if someone has an ID, you don't actually physically show them the space. You just kind of sit them down and do a virtual tour. So she sits down and, you know, the folks there are excited to show her the amenities. But her housing case manager says, you know, Rahima has this federal voucher and there are very strict standards attached to this voucher. One of them is that if you have a bedroom, it has to have egress, meaning like if you have a bedroom, it has to have a window. But one of the big trends in building in a city like Seattle is, you know, the rise of something called urban 1-bedrooms, where it's basically like a studio with a little kind of internal tiny bedroom space, but it kind of has walls-ish, like sliding walls, but no window. So, you know, as soon as Rahima sits down and starts to hear about these wonderful amenities and this jazz lounge or whatever else, she finds out that her voucher actually won't apply to this new affordable housing development because of the standards attached to it. And, you know, Rahima as a person, one of her coping mechanisms was her optimism and her bubbly personality. And, you know, it doesn't matter, I'm just going to stay positive through all of this. But in that moment, you know, I couldn't read her expression behind her mask, but my heart broke for her, you know, like she's sitting there thinking this is fate. And she can't get inside with this federal voucher for what seems like an absolutely absurd reason. And again, you know, you take the experience of this one person and just apply it to thousands of people. There are thousands of people out there who don't even have the voucher, but even if they do get the voucher, that doesn't mean that they get housing. And that's another thing that I think we're missing from our understanding of like homelessness and housing. It's not a straight path from like shelter to voucher to housing to whatever. There are all these like barriers along the way that require almost like superhuman persistence. And it's you are confronted with the despair of just having to navigate a system that frankly wasn't built to care for you.
You know, in reading your article, one thing that I really got is what you just said there was optimism. And this spirit about Rahima. It's like, yo, just keep going. I'm gonna find a way basically to take this lemon and literally make lemonade. but also to want to encourage others. And this music video that we're going to play right here, I mean, it's amazing because the title of it is "Thank You, Seattle." Is the title of the video. Maybe you can set it up for us real quick, Sydney, before we play it.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a contradiction because what I wrote about and what I wrote in Rahima's story is how Seattle, structurally doesn't really care about people like her. But at the same time, Rahima felt this immense gratitude to her care team, to the individual people she had surrounded herself with. So her social worker and her nurse on this tiny palliative care team, her doctors, she felt like even though she was going through this, even though she was facing all these obstacles, she had immense gratitude. And I think that gratitude is what allowed her to survive for so long. And you'll see that reflected in her music.
It won't be my EP without finishing and say thank you for the people who came and joined me and support me.
It's my time to be open and to tell about this enemy. Enemy that has no compassion, enemy that has no fear, enemy that has no love for us. I find the urge to stand up and say that we should not fear the enemy. His name cancer for a long time, a long, long time. We should not fear the enemy. We should not be blind to any changes we see in our bodies. I believe if we unite and have the same strength, we can be winners. So it's my time. It's my time to be open and to tell about this enemy. Enemy that has no compassion, enemy that has no fear, enemy that has no love for us.
First, thank you, Seattle, Washington State, for opening the door for me, for making me feel I'm home. And this is my home. Seattle is my home now. I want to thank San Francisco Hospital, Federal Way. You did everything you could, and you came up with a solution. It was a solution, it was something you saw after the test. You're the one who found I have cancer. You did everything you could to send me to the place I can be with the right people and the right doctors and the right environment.
To my big hospital, which I love, SCCA, you're the best. You keep doing what you're supposed to do. You keep doing what you promise us. People who dealing with cancer, to hold on, and one day we will find together the solution.
And
hopefully soon.
I thank my doctor team, all of you guys. You support me, you check on me. When I'm down, you lift me up. And Dr. Hunter, you're the best doctor. Maybe this time, other doctors, they will walk with you. They will come and ask you, what did you do to that girl named Rahima? Thank you, Dr. Hunter.
It's my time to be open and to tell about this enemy. Enemy that has no compassion, enemy that has no fear, enemy that has no love for us.
But like I told cancer, cancer, middle and cancer. Today, I'll tell the whole world we're gonna bury you. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I love you, all my friends around the world. Let's get together, let's come together and finish this cancer. This is our baby. And now we're done to tell my story, to tell my story, to tell my story, to tell my story.
Wow. I mean, you got to imagine, like, the determination that Rahima had. There's somebody who's facing death, who's in a situation of being homeless, moving from place to place, but she was determined to still be thankful. The intentionality to just be thankful, regardless, to be thankful, and to record the song and be able to team up with these guys here and make a music video. But that'll tell you something, that even this woman is gone, but you can still feel that how intentional she was to say thank you.
You know, I agree 100%. And this is when you're talking about that optimism, you know, there's a lot of folks that are unhoused that share that. It's something that allows them to continue on and to keep going. And I know that it carried her to actually her receiving a unit, an apartment where she could actually live. And I know that we have a photo. It just brought so much joy to see this photo of her finally in her home. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this is Rahima in her new apartment with her social worker Michael Light and her housing case manager Josh Torgrosa. And I think in this moment they're putting together furniture, they're deciding where things are going to be. And in this unit, the really cool thing is that if you stood at that window on clear days, you can see Mount Rainier. It's actually an amazing view. And Rahima and Michael and Josh had all these plans for how they were going to furnish the place. Rahima had these plans that she was going to finish her album. Like, a part of her plan was to do like this kind of huge release of the album. And actually being on this show is totally something Rahima would have wanted. Like, this would have been nuts for her. She would have loved this. Unfortunately, Rahima died 9 days after moving into that apartment.
And we actually have one more photo we want to put up here. These photos by Erica Schultz. And maybe you could explain this photo right here for us.
Yeah, so Rahima is holding a little decoration for her new apartment that says the future is bright. And this moment really stuck out to Michael Light, her social worker. You know, 2 weeks later when he had to come back and pack up all of Rahima's things that they had just helped her move into the apartment with, this is the image that stuck in his brain. It's her having this moment of hope. And, you know, before Rahima moved into her new place, she was outside of medical respite, which is this shelter kind of attached to the hospital. So doctors don't have to discharge people directly to the street, although, you know, it's time limited. You can't stay there forever. And a lot of people do get discharged to the street. You know, she said to me she was holding gifts from her friends. One of them was like a $50 scratch off lotto ticket and some pajama pants that her friend had given her. And she said, you know, we made it, and it's going to be so beautiful. And throughout the year and a half that she had been looking for housing, you know, that was something that she kept saying to people, like, I have to stay alive. I have to stay alive to get into housing. And something that I learned after Rahima's death is that for a lot of people like her, when they finally get into housing, you know, the stress of everything kind of catches up with them and they can die quickly soon thereafter. You know, for Rahima, the medical examiner said that she died of a toxic combination of her of methamphetamines because she occasionally at times used meth, which is very common for people, especially women who are homeless, to use because it helps them stay alert at night and protect themselves. So it was meth, it was fentanyl, which was prescribed for her cancer, it was her antidepressants. And, you know, we don't really know why Rahima died. There's kind of like a spiritual answer, you know, which I am not equipped to answer. And then there's like a scientific one, which we don't fully know because, you know, the scientists don't fully know what triggered her to die. But all we know for certain is that this is a very common situation that often, you know, when people who are very sick get into housing, they die shortly after. And also it's a function of how our homelessness system works too, because the way that people are prioritized, there's not enough housing to go around. So the way that the system works is it prioritizes you for housing based on how quote unquote vulnerable you are. That often means that we wait until people are super, super sick to finally get them into housing. And then when they do, they die. So, you know, instead of like giving people housing when they're less sick and have a better chance at survival, sometimes we're only getting them what they need at the very end of their lives.
You know, Sydney, two things here real quick before we let you go. One, clearly this story impacted you. But what's the main takeaway that you want people to know about this article and about Rahima?
Oh man, there's so much. I think to me at the end of this, the thing that stands out the most is how little our society just structurally cares about people like Rahima. And, you know, so often the conversation around homelessness gets reduced to like individual opinions and thoughts like, oh, you're a good person if you think this way, or if you think this should be done, or you're a bad person if you think this way. It's not about that. You know, it's about how we have created a society where if you are not seen as productive, if you are homeless, if you are sick, if you are disabled, we literally do not have places for you to go. You have no options. Like our system is not set up for that. And I think that is a major reflection of our values as a society. And it's been this way since Seattle's settlement days. You know, for another article accompanying the story, I interviewed Josephine Ensign, who is a professor of nursing at the University of Washington, and she writes about the history of homelessness in Seattle. And she writes about the first documented case of homelessness in Seattle in 1854. It was this sailor, 32 years old, found, you know, on the beach of Elliott Bay with severe frostbite, mentally ill. And for years, you know, the early territorial leaders of Seattle debated, what should we do with him? Where do we go? And eventually they just shipped him back to the East Coast where he died by suicide. You know, this is not a new problem, but it is reaching kind of crisis proportions because we have, you know, a homelessness crisis. We have a housing crisis. So there are far more people experiencing what Rahima is experiencing. And so, you know, as a homelessness reporter, that is what I want people to take away. But as a human being, you know, I'm still wrapping my head around and my heart around who Rahima was and what it meant, you know, just kind of personally to deal with something as terrifying as chronic illness and as terrifying as this kind of institutional apathy. And so, yeah, I'm so interested to hear what other people take away from it too.
Right. Well, you know, this story, and we're so supposed to be here right now talking about this. It wasn't last night. It was 2 nights ago. It was early morning here because, you know, I'm always here. And I read the article and I emailed Sydney saying, you know what, I would love to talk to you about this. You know, I sent that email like maybe midnight, 1 a.m, and I continued here working. And about an hour and a half later, I got a WhatsApp from my friend Abu Bakr Shamte over in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, over in Zanzibar, where I lived over there for years and worked in media and everything, and with Abu Bakr. And it was the link to your story. And he sent it over, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. He's following, this story over here. Abu Bakr, who I worked with for years over in Tanzania at Push Mobile and Push Observer, Rahima was his blood cousin. And I was sitting there just blown away. He was like, bro, this was my cousin. And he talked about how they had no idea the depths of everything that Rahima went through. But I will tell you this, is one thing Abu Bakr Shamte told me to tell you. Asante sana, nashkuru sana, shukran. Thank you. Thank you, Sydney Brownstone, for caring. Thank you for uplifting. Thank you for uplifting Rahima's name. And thank you for uplifting what's happening here in our city. And thank you for your humanity. I just really wanted to pass that on to you.
Thank you so much. I'm obviously very emotional. Thank you for having me on your show. And that means a lot after working on a story like this. So thank you.
All right. We'll go wide right here.
I am glad the camera hasn't been on me. I am so impacted by this, and I extend that thank you so much, because I learned so much. And we talk about the nuances all the time, the working poor. We talk about people dealing with mental illness, chronic illness. But this right here, this personal account of Rahima's life was so impactful for me. So, Sydney, keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a phenomenal job. Thank you for highlighting this for all of the city and beyond to see, because it's important that we uplift our people. All of these people are our people. Nobody should be thrown away. And I just thank you so much for following Rahima and understanding and spotlighting all of these details so that we can get it too. So appreciate your work.
Thank you, Trey. Thank you, Amari. Thank you to Erica Schultz, who did this beautiful videography and photos. Go check it out on the Seattle Times to see it. It tells a completely different story than the one I just told you, like more about Rahima's humanity. And I appreciate the work you both are doing. Thank you so much.
All right. Hopefully we're going to see you again soon, huh?
Yeah, that would be great.
All right.
Awesome.
Have a good day, Sydney.
Bye,
Thanks,
Sydney. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, just phenomenal all around when we talk about the importance of storytelling and journalism and digging deep. That was such a great example of it all.
Well, I think the best thing is that, and we talk about, I told my mama this morning, I said, Mama, what a blessed, amazing, charmed life that I've lived. It's crazy because in the 10 o'clock hour, they're talking about this police ruse. But in the 11 o'clock hour, imagine all this crisscross zigzag life I've lived around the world, that we got an opportunity to uplift Rahima. And it's like I worked with her cousin for years over there. And I know I'm still bugging over that. But I think the best thing is, man, Sydney reminds us that, when you just sprinkle in a little bit of humanity, when you could just tell a little bit of somebody's story, we all kind of act a bit different because it gives us a reason to care.
Absolutely. And it's uplifting, to be honest, to understand that people in Rahima's situation are moving with the optimism, that level of optimism that Rahima had. And we heard it in her song. I'm just so grateful because Sydney made it clear that if Rahima could see that her music video debuted right here on Converge, that we shared that and aired it for the public, how powerful, she would feel in that moment. So it just did something for me, for us to be able to play her video here today and to really share her story.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like I said, good stuff. Erica Schultz,
Yeah.
Good stuff, Sydney. I know we're overtime, Trey. Appreciate it, man. Any last words before we get out of here?
Oh, for me, people find their brilliance in a multitude of ways. And I'm always encouraging you all out there to find your brilliance. And if you have your brilliance already, share it with the community, share it with the world, be a part of Amazing Solutions. Clearly, Erica and Sydney have done that in this story by highlighting something that is so significant and profound in our city and throughout King County. We need to care more. And I hope you guys are inspired today to do something to move yourself forward as a part of some solutions out there.
We. Sasa nami is safari pale chini wa Tanzania. You know, even leo kusema Kiswahili kidogo sana leo. You know, so these days I speak Swahili just a little bit, but I said we are safari pale chini wa Tanzania. We're going to take a trip down there to Tanzania. You know what I'm saying? They'll say karibu numbani. They'll say welcome home.
Yeah.
And you know, I can't wait now to get back there to Dar es Salaam and to get over to Stone Town and Zanzibar, and man, be able to talk to them there about our experience here. Pretty amazing stuff. Hey, we don't have anything coming on later on tonight. We got a break because the rest of the week is jam-packed. But tomorrow, we're joined by, we got some nice motion graphics. So who you got up first? Go ahead and press the button. Yeah, why not? Go ahead. There it is. Mike Davis is a reporter with the South Seattle Emerald. He's going to be bringing us a scoop from south of Seattle.
Yeah.
And then we got one of the best voices in the business. Definitely not the best space. Brian Callanan from the Seattle Channel and also the host of Seattle News, Views, and Brews. He'll be right here. He'll be in this seat right next to you. And we also want to keep reminding people that T-Dub is with you on Friday.
Sure is. T-Dub will be with me for Feel Good Friday. Looking forward to sitting down with T-Dub and diving into all the things that are at the art of all of it.
You know, I like this. People are always like, man, you got to promote your other shows so much. And like, we move so fast. It's like, I got to slow down.
Yeah.
If we're going to make any commercials for anybody, we need to uplift our people here. Want to give a big thank you today to our director, Salman Abukwashi. You know what I'm saying? This was a different kind of show today. And thank you. Appreciate you. We got Brady McAtee here. And as usual, Jake Graff brought behind the camera. Trey Holiday, I appreciate you. On that note, want to remind everybody, let's go forward in our purpose and go forward in our humanity. And until tomorrow at 11 a.m., we're going to leave you with some hope. Peace.
What do I see through a lens of fear? 1,000 little steps to go. What do I fear after all these years? Lord knows I don't even know. I've been running on the edge of a sundial, sleeping in the shadow. I've been begging you to see me, then hiding beyond the unreachable. Looking out left on a right-hand turn, just trying to make a deal. A lazy shoes and love is a love that turn. That's the kind of food that heals. I've been searching for the end of an era, waiting to be ready. The world is bigger than a moment. Be steady, that's how you can feel it's real. But I feel naked. I got used to hiding the holes. This old world got new tricks and I'm in the thick of it. This I swear I'm already sick of it. At least I found the antidote. Oh. No one is a shadow.